Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 32 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Welcome, everyone, to the program. My name is Jason Romano. It's great to have you here today. As always, you can subscribe and download the podcast and leave a review on iTunes. You can also check it out on Google Play and Stitcher, everywhere podcasts are found. And, of course, all of our content is found at sportsspectrum.com. Today's podcast is sort of a bonus podcast. This is one I'm releasing literally the day I'm doing this interview. And the reason is because of the news factor that is attached to it. Anquan Boldin, many of you know, 14 years as an NFL wide receiver, retired abruptly just this past week after signing a one-year deal with the Buffalo Bills just a few weeks earlier on August 7th. And on August 20th, 13 days later, he announced his retirement. And Anquan is, a believer in Jesus Christ. He's worked with our ministry in some of the different aspects of Football Sunday and the increase. And we know him and we know his faith. And we wanted to get him on the program and talk to him about his decision, talk to him about his faith and what part that faith in Jesus Christ played in him walking away from the NFL. And I also wanted to ask him about Charlottesville and everything that's happened down in Charlottesville, Virginia, from a few weeks ago, and just what his reaction was and how important of a part that was in his decision in retiring. And then also kind of dive into just where our country is right now and helping to understand sort of that intersection of race and faith. So here is our interview, our podcast interview, episode number 32, with former NFL wide receiver, recently retired wide receiver, Anquan Boldin. Anquan joins us here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. And Anquan, on August 7th, you signed a one-year deal with the Bills. And then August 20th, just a few days before we're taping this podcast, 13 days later, you announced your retirement from the NFL after 14 seasons. What changed for you in those 13 days?
Well, for me, it wasn't just a split decision. It was something that I had been dealing with over a couple of years. I just felt led to do something else. So that's the reason that I stepped away from the game.
How long, you say it's been a couple years, but how long have you really been mulling this decision to say goodbye to the NFL as an active player? What were those conversations like with your wife and your family?
Well, it's been over a number of years. I would say about 2 or 3 years, to be exact. I went through a tragedy a couple of years ago when I was playing in San Francisco, and that began a cycle of me, thinking about retirement, thinking about doing something other than football. Mind you, football has always been my passion. It's the thing that I've wanted to do most since I can remember. But sometimes there's things that just trump your passion. There's some things that you feel led to do. And for me, that was helping people.
You've been open about your faith, and you don't shy away from that. You've shared your testimony with our Sports Spectrum ministry family as part of Football Sunday and part of the Increase and PAO. I'm just curious how your faith in Christ played a part in your decision to retire.
Well, for me, I've always been taught that, my will isn't what I should be pursuing. It's the will of God. And sometimes what we want to do and what God have us to do, they cross paths at times. And us as people, we have to make decisions. And for me, I want to do everything that I can to make sure that I stay in the will of God. And I just felt, like I said, led to go another direction. God has blessed me to be able to live out my dream. I've lived, been able to play 14 years. I mean, that's something that people only dream about. And I had a chance to play a 15th season. But I felt led to do something else. So for me, was it an easy decision to walk away from, the thing that I love to do and my passion? No. But as a man of God and somebody who wants to stay in the will of God, it made it easier to walk away.
Was there any type of sort of, Scripture tells us to seek wise counsel. I'm curious if there was any kind of person or a pastor or somebody that you leaned on or talked to help you with this decision and kind of help you grow deeper in your faith in terms of figuring out what that will of God is?
Yeah, I have different leaders in my church that have been praying with me over a period of time now. I actually brought this up to them even before I signed with the Bills, and they have been praying with me over a number of months. And I was just, seeking God, trying to figure out what it is that God would have me to do. If it was to continue football. So yes, I did have a number of leaders in my church who were praying over this decision with me.
You talk about, in your statement to Jim Trotter, the importance of, feeling drawn to make the larger fight for the human rights a priority. Your life's purpose is bigger than football. I want to talk, and we'll talk a little bit more about that specific statement in a minute. Jim Trotter, of course, with ESPN. But I want to ask you about everything that went down. You were obviously in Buffalo or in the camp with the Bills in that short time when everything went down in Charlottesville and in Virginia a few weeks ago. I'm just because I want to kind of go into this direction a little bit because of what your statement said. So what was your reaction when you saw what was happening? Kind of what was going through your mind and your heart and your spirit when you saw everything that was going on down there?
Well, for me, I was heartbroken to see where we are as a country, how divisive we are, to see just how divided we are. I mean, I was heartbroken. And that's not to say that I haven't been heartbroken over the past couple of years. But I think for me, it was just a tipping point. And the thing about it is I was called by, I got a Jewish friend who called me. And he was just trying to make sense of the entire Charlottesville thing. He pretty much called me to talk, but he was venting. And he was saying that, never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would have saw this in America. He was like, guys walking around with flags, with swastikas on it, guys screaming, the Jews will not replace us, making hateful comments about African Americans, making hateful comments about LGBT community. He was like, I never thought I would have saw this in America. He was like, I have more trust, I have more faith in America than that, and I felt like we would have never gotten to this point. And for me, I told him that, as an African American growing up in this country, it's something that we've dealt with for a number of years, even before I was born. So it's nothing new to me. It's nothing new to us as African Americans. It's a thing that we've had to learn to deal with over the years. And I say every time we've cried out for help, we've always been told to get over it, to go back to Africa, and comments such as that. And I told him, now is a time where it's no longer just African Americans that have to deal with prejudices or injustices. It's us as a country. I say no longer are we just the target, but it's all of us as Americans. And the only way that is going to change is if we stand up as Americans together and fight the hatred, the bigotry, whatever it is that's going on. So for me, I was really hurt by what I was seeing. I mean, obviously, I've been hurt over the past couple of years. I had, just 2 years ago, I lost a cousin to, gun violence by a police officer. My cousin broke down on the side of the road, and that cost him his life. And that shouldn't be, in a land that we call land of the free, home of the brave. I mean, that's absolutely unacceptable.
You're talking to a 40-year-old white man here, Anquan, to be quite transparent. And, everything that's happened in this country, it's divided right now. It's really been sad to watch. And, I feel kind of helpless in a lot of ways. I feel sort of, I don't know, like I'm a white guy and I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to have a voice in the sense of what people of African-American descent or others are going through. And you see, just this injustice that's happening. And I think it's important to say something. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because I feel it's important to have a voice. It's important to keep conversation going. But I don't know. I'm trying to grip and get a grip and understand what is happening right now. So I guess I'll just let you respond and just, I guess, ask you, how important is it to keep this conversation going?
I think it's very important to keep the conversation going, but I think at this point, this conversation is going on everywhere. I don't think you can turn from this conversation. Wherever you look, people are talking about what's going on in this country, the racial divide. So I think it's going on in schools. I think it's going on in barbershops. I think it's going on at homes. I think it's going on in churches. So I don't think it's so much of the conversation. I think we're past the part where we need to keep the conversation going, and I think we're at a point now where action has to be taken.
What is action, though, in your eyes? When you say action needs to be taken, what does that entail in your eyes? Does that kind of entail in the sense of the reason why you retired, maybe?
Definitely. And for me, I think we're at a point in this country where no one can no longer sit idly by and let things happen because they don't feel affected by what's going on. And for me, I was looking at the NFL, and some things just didn't add up for me. And what I mean by that is everybody looks at the NFL as this microcosm of what society should be. You got people from all different race, religions, backgrounds, you name it. You have all of these different parts coming together for one common goal. And when you're inside of sports and you're part of a team, you consider that team your family. You always hear people say, I'll do whatever I need to do for my brothers. I'm willing to go all out for my brothers, so on and so forth. But I think inside of sports, that's not even happening. When you look at sports at its purest form, and when I say purest form, I'm talking about Pop Warner leagues and things like that. You have all of this coming together, and that's true. You have all of these different moving parts coming together for one common goal. But I think when you get to college sports, college athletics, and specifically NFL, it's no longer. I think money rules everything when it comes to those things. So no longer am I concerned about my brother's needs or my brother's, well-being.
Right.
I'm concerned about the top dollar. And what I see going on in the NFL now is you have guys taking stances about what's going on in society. Guys are taking stances about injustices that they're experiencing, inequalities that are going on in our communities, in our country. But they're being shunned by people who call them family. You have coaches, GMs, owners, sometimes even players telling guys, this is not the place for that. We don't want our locker room divided. But I feel like if my brother is crying out for help, my goal is to help my brother, no matter what the cost is, no matter what other people are saying.
Yeah.
My goal is to help my brother. And I don't feel like that is happening. And then you have some people saying, when guys take stances, especially when it comes to ownership, GMs and managers, I give you permission to protest. Because saying you support me doesn't mean that you support me. And in the NFL, I think that's what's going on. Coaches are saying, or, GMs and owners are saying, I'm behind my guys. If they want to protest, I'll allow them to protest. They don't have to worry about their jobs.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that isn't support. That's permission. You're giving a guy permission to protest. Now, if I say I support you, that means I'm behind you 100%. That means I'm going to stand behind you in the efforts that you make, That means I'm going to stand behind you and support, the programs that you have in these communities where you see these injustices happening. When you have guys go to Capitol Hill and they're fighting for different bills and laws to be passed, that means I'm going with you. I'm not just sending you or allowing you, making sure that my brother is okay. And that's the thing that I'm saying in NFL that I don't like and I don't agree with.
Well, I think there's a difference too in supporting someone and agreeing with everything that they're talking about. Is that fair?
Definitely.
Because I think you
But
think people think if they're supporting someone and maybe they don't agree with whatever it is, but when they support someone, then that automatically means that they agree with everything that every other person is doing. And I think our society has that a little mixed up.
definitely, most definitely.
Anquan, just a few more minutes here, and I do appreciate your time. I know you're busy and you've been getting requests everywhere right now in this time, but I just want to ask you a few questions about, well, really one question about Colin Kaepernick. You didn't mention his name, but certainly everybody's been talking about him as far as not having a job right now. A lot of the players, and you mentioned the stances. I mean, even saw it with the Cleveland Browns being sort of the first team that had like a prayer huddle during the national anthem in the bench on Monday night in their preseason game against the Giants. You hear some coaches, like you said, say, we don't want this distraction, and others who are saying you're standing for this national anthem no matter what, and others who are supporting the idea of standing up and making your voice heard. What about you in the situation with Colin? Not necessarily why he doesn't have a job right now, and certainly you can chime in on that as well, but just what is going on, like you mentioned, around the NFL as far as the stances that really started and were triggered from Colin in last year?
Well, for me, I agree with guys taking a stance. I think in order for anything to happen in this country, guys are going to have to stand up. We can't just, because we've been so, silent for so long, and we've just gone along with the status quo. And I think anytime anybody takes a stance about anything, there's going to be backlash because people are uncomfortable with change.
Right.
I think that's the reason that you're seeing so much of what's going on in this country now. People are not any longer sitting back and allowing things to just happen. People are challenging the authorities to be because of what they're seeing. And I think it makes some people uncomfortable. And that's why you see people say, well, you're a football player, stay in your place, continue to play football and shut up about everything else.
Yeah.
But I think it's impossible to tell a guy to shut up about something that he's affected by on a daily basis. Being an NFL player doesn't exempt you from being racially profiled. It doesn't exempt you from having injustices go against you. It definitely doesn't exempt you from having family members killed based on the color of their skin. So while people want us to be quiet as athletes, we are actual citizens who are just privileged to be able to play a game that we love. But at the same time, we're still being affected by the things that are going on in this country.
And I think God gives you, a specific platform for a reason, because it talks about speaking for the least of these. And there's opportunities, even this podcast. And for me, I love being able to share the stories of sports and faith and being a place where we can shine light back to the Lord, of course, and be able to share a story on a platform that some others don't have. And that's what you have. You have a platform now. And you've talked about this, about retiring and living out your life's purpose, standing up for those that can't stand for themselves, for human rights. So let me ask you this, Anquan, as we close here, what do you think is the number one thing that you can do or that we can do as a country to heal right now?
Number one, we have to unite, and we just have to walk in truth. And the truth is the word of God. And to be honest with you, that's all I have at this point. That's the only thing that my hope is in at this point. When I stand before God, I can't tell him I won the Super Bowl. I can't tell him that I was top 10 in receptions all time. I can't tell him that, I was a great football player for 14 years. God don't want to hear anything about that. What he wants to hear, number one, what did you do with my son? Did you accept him or did you reject him? Number two, what did you do with the time that you were afforded on earth? How did you spend that time? And when I stand before God, I want to be able to give him a great answer. I want to be able to tell him that, Lord, I live for you, that I pursued your will as much as possible. I tried to deny myself and my wants and my needs as much as possible. And I think, being able to stand up for other people, being able to fight for what's right, being on the right side of that is important to me. Could I continue to play football? Yes. Do I still have a passion to play football? Of course I do. That's the thing that I've wanted to do since I was a young kid. But like I said, there's some things that trump that. There's some things that are far more important than just playing the game of football. And in no way am I trying to demean football, because football has been great to me. It's afforded me different opportunities. It's afforded me relationships that I probably never would have had. It's afforded me the opportunity to be able to provide for my family and to be able to help others. But I think now is a time for me to use that platform in a different way.
Anquan Boldin, I really appreciate your time here on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and hopefully we can sit down maybe in person at the Increase Conference or another place and kind of have more of a retrospective look at your career. And maybe by next March, we'll be able to look at some of the things you've been doing over these last few months since you retired from football. But really appreciate you coming on and being so candid. And hopefully we all learned something here today listening to you. So thanks so much for being here.
No problem. I thank you for having me on.
Wow. Just really appreciate Anquan Boldin and his candor, his transparency, his just ability to be real. And what he's going through, what he's seeing, and he's helping this guy, this podcast host guy, understand a little bit more about the injustices that are happening, from a point of view that I can't understand and I'll never be able to understand. So I really do appreciate Anquan, and we appreciate from Sports Spectrum Anquan coming on the podcast, and would love to hear what you think about this. Send us feedback and tweet at us on Twitter, sports_spectrum. You can tweet at me at Jason Romano. Send us a note on Facebook. Send us an email. Whatever it is, just let us know what you thought of him and what he said. And, you could tell his heart is to do the will of God and to do the will of the one who created him. And if that's not enough, I don't know what is, to try and follow the will of God and stand for the injustices that are happening, stand up for them, and make his voice known and actually take action. And so I'm excited to see what happens with Anquan in his post-NFL career, and really, truly do thank him for being on the podcast. And we thank you for listening. We really do. Our next podcast is going to drop in a couple days. It'll be episode number 33 with Eagles safety Chris Maragos and Ted Winsley, who is the Eagles team chaplain. I really think you guys will enjoy that episode as well. That will be episode number 33 coming in a couple days. Like I said, this is sort of a special episode that, we just found out that Anquan was available. And I wanted to tape this and talk to him about some of the things off the field and some of the reasons why he retired. So this was episode 32. 33, episode 33 will be coming on Friday. And look forward to having you guys check all of that out. As always, you can reach us at sportspectrum.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast.